Hi, this is Randle here in Texas.
Now I'm Matt here in Michigan. Today we're talking about a 2011 film, Contagion. It's got a star-studded cast, including Lawrence Fishburne, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jude Law, Matt Damon, and Kate Winslet. The reason we are talking about this movie is because there is some parallels to things that are happening in the world today. Specifically, we're talking about COVID-19, the virus pandemic around the world that's affecting real life people and how people are responding. Now, we just want to get this out of the way. Randall and I are not health experts. We have no doctoral degrees. We have no background when it comes to health. We're movie fans, and we see some parallels with this movie and some real world events that are happening. So, Randall, first off, what do you think about this movie Contagion?
So, I really liked Contagion the first time I watched it back when it was in theaters in 2011, and I certainly really like it now, having rewatched it. It's definitely a little bit of, hyperbole. It's showing kind of the worst case scenario. What could happen if some, like, Black Death type, super contagion enters into our environment and the fallout from that. I think it does a really good job of depicting that, and it does a really good job of, with the characters, of displaying, no one's, I don't want to say immune, but, everyone will be impacted by it in some way, shape, or form. It does a really good job setting up the world and saying, if this happened, then this would happen, and then this would happen, and showing those dominoes.
People have to keep in mind, I think, a little bit as they watch this, like, just because it's play out in this movie, that doesn't mean that's what's playing out in the real world, but it does show you there are some real world concerns about, how viruses spread, how people react to them kind of thing, other than just people getting sick, other ways that it affects people and can affect people's lives.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So one of the things about this movie that really hits home for me is when you start to see, I don't want to say civilization breaking down, but you start to see the niceties of civilization breaking down, because people are basically confined to their homes at some point in this film after the epidemic just gets out of hand. Trash starts piling up. Like all of the normal niceties of life that you take for granted, you can no longer take for granted. You got to go stand in food lines and risk getting sick just to get food, etc. It really strikes home for me because as a person who works in technology right now, I see that parallel with what's going on with COVID-19 in China, because a lot of the technology, the PCB boards are made in China and Taiwan. That area is particularly hard hit. So we see shortages. We see laptop shortages. We see shortages for just components and how prices are going to be going up soon or have already gone up. Uh, this kind of stuff really does happen.
One thing I thought kind of interesting about this movie too is just showing about officials specifically weighing what to release out, like what information to give and share, to what will help people, and opposed to what will lead to you know chaos and stuff. Because in
Mass
this
panic,
movie, yeah,
yeah.
panic kind of thing, and we haven't said this yet, but we are going to get into spoilers in this discussion. This movie has been out for 9 years or so now. So we are going to get into some spoilers, but yes, I mean, there is panic in this, and that is a concern. Something is like we want to show like how serious this is, but the same thing too, if you cause a panic, it causes more problems. It doesn't help the problem.
It's interesting because of our not just Americans' current administration, but some other administrations around the world, especially in China, and how China literally tried to sweep COVID-19 under the rug for our real world comparison. Before it was like, oh no, this is definitely an outbreak, and it is something that has to be taken seriously. And in most totalitarian governments, it's certainly normal to try and downplay things. But in a democracy like we have in the United States, you expect your elected officials to be forthright with you. and some of that we might not be getting, but this film attacks it very politically from a very good perspective. You know, Lawrence Fishburne's character at one point goes on and says something, or he tells his wife, "I want you to get out of Chicago." And he shouldn't have from an official capacity because he's the head of the CDC.
The other thing I thought, interesting, you're talking about, political structure, but also just world leaders actually come together. How important that when these kind of like outbreaks or things come out, how important it is for world governments to work together and not, like you said, try to just like cover it up. Like, hey, don't like release information or whatever. There's a lot that plays out in this movie. I know some officials in like China and stuff there said, oh, we hear, the Americans and the French are coming up with a vaccine for this kind of thing, and we want to get in on that.
You talk about like all the different governments kind of working together in that movie. In Contagion, a member of the World Health Organization is taken hostage basically until there's a vaccine available. They're like, we have your person hostage, and when there's a vaccine, we'll release her. Like that kind of scare is put into people that they're willing to go to those lengths.
There's a lot in this movie about desperation, like people taking desperate actions, for their loved ones. We joke, before lighter things on like toy movies, like Christmas movies, like people like rushing to get the toys. But this, like people are fighting to either get food, food rations that are short, or to go to the pharmacy to get, meds and stuff or whatever they think is going to protect them or help them fight this illness.
So you mentioned meds and how much people were desperate, and this movie deals with desperate people in a desperate time. So it's a good way to pivot towards Jude Law's character in this film. He plays a blogger, which isn't an outright like journalist specifically, but he kind of gets the scoop on this really early, and he tries to sell it to a major news outlet, and they basically just turn him down, and he's disenfranchised by that. But eventually he becomes kind of like a fearmonger profiteer, because he starts selling Cynthia, which is the cure for it, which isn't really the cure for anything. It's just, it's snake oil,
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Well, you know what? We already told everyone there'd be spoilers.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
But yeah, like he's going about quote unquote selling the cure for this, and he knows it's BS, and most of the people that he's working with know it's BS, but it doesn't matter because they're making profit. And if for our viewers who don't know, Matt has worked in journalism. He has his degree in journalism, so he has some interesting thoughts on the character.
Definitely, Jude Law's character definitely stood out to me for the reasons that you mentioned. Kind of, I actually have some experience. Granted, not necessarily like in the same levels that showed in Jude Law, but yes, I have a background in journalism. It was kind of interesting, seeing Jude Law pitch that story, and then feeling with like the editor or producer who was there and basically says, yes, I have concerns. This is one instance of video that you're showing me, and you're already jumping to these conclusions, whether they turn out to be real or not. It's stuff as a journalist that you have to vet. You have to look into, kind of thing. It just shows, like you're talking about, where his reporting actually leads to people believing things that aren't true so that he can make a name for himself, so he can help sell a false product. It shows that those kind of things can happen.
At the end of the movie, him and his cohorts really do get their comeuppance after a vaccine has been released through like painstakingly long science, etc., and many chimps. Lots of chimps die in the making of this film. No, not really, but for the purposes of the movie. But Jude Law's character and the people he was working with to sell the miracle cure, they absolutely get prosecuted, which is, you like to see bad people get their comeuppance, so I'm okay with that.
Another scene that was interesting with Jude Law actually had Lawrence Fishburne too. Part of what Jude Law was doing is he was really tapping in some people's distrust for the government. Basically, like, government officials are looking out for themselves kind of thing. And I think that really came to a head when Lawrence Fishburne's character was on like a TV talk show program, and they had Jude Law's character on it as well to basically like grill him kind of thing, to like throw at him his concern stuff. And Jude Law did have some secret information. He grew such a following that some of the information he got was correct that wasn't being released. But a lot of the claims that, that he wasn't. And that's another thing too, as a journalist, you kind of got to be like a little bit of a gatekeeper too on what information is released. A lot of people just want to say like, release it all, release it all. But if you release everything like Jude Law says, it does lead to that confusion of stuff that is, not true kind of thing, that people are going to, I'm seeing it out there, it must be true kind of thing. Guys, don't believe everything you see on the internet. And even as a journalist,
fact check, fact check.
I would say don't immediately just brush things off. But yes, you should take things in with a sense of skepticism.
Yeah, and from this film coming out in 2011, which is way before the era of like mainstream fake news, which is like circa 2016 and above. Really, it's not that fake news wasn't happening, but it's really kind of ahead of its time from that perspective. You don't expect them to make such a big point of it, but more to your point as well is Jude Law's character gains so many followers and so many people that a lot of the information he gets starts being accurate, and that's probably fairly accurate for a lot of reporters. They have their highly trusted sources, and they're kind of like shady trusted sources versus, I heard this, but I don't know the source is reliable kind of sources. He builds that up throughout the film, where he actually starts getting good information, but it doesn't stop him from peddling his miracle cure, which is just making him rich.
Well, another thing I kind of want to talk about, another character that kind of shows a different side of things. I want to talk about like Matt Damon's character. Matt Damon, he is show you how virus or epidemic, pandemic kind of thing would affect the everyday person.
He's the everyday man in this film.
He is the everyday man. He is, the father. His wife dies as well as his son within a matter of hours of each other from this deadly virus. And it just basically goes through, him learning that information, him being quarantined, how it affects his other family members and his family members' lives as well.
Yeah, like there's a really couple of interesting scenes with his daughter and her not quite boyfriend, but the boy she has a serious crush on, where she goes outside and that is not okay. You don't know whether or not he's sick, the high school boy is sick, and there's a scene where he comes and he wants to give his condolences, but Matt Damon's character's like, no, thank you, but you can't come in. And so, well, I'll leave the flowers. Like, nope, take the flowers. It is just like he does everything that he can to protect what he has left, which is his daughter, basically. After the devastating news that not only did his wife die and his wife gave the disease to their son, unintentionally, but that his wife was also cheating on him, and then that she gave it to some guy that he was cheating on. Like, he has to deal with such an amazing amount of terribly bad news in this, and then still just keep on keeping on, basically. And it just goes back to the point you made earlier about this movie's a lot about desperation, basically. This character is desperate to protect what he has left, which is his daughter.
I think this movie does a good job at humanizing a lot of the characters. Do they give them like a positive kind of outlook kind of thing? Like, Lawrence Fishburne, he takes his vaccine and he gives it to the son of a janitor at the CDC who he walks into. So it shows you that human side. Also, you see Kate Winslet in her last, Kate Winslet's character, she actually gets the illness and dies. But one of her last actions is to give the coat that she has to keep herself warm, to try to give it to the person next to her that's freezing, knowing that they are both going to die, or likely going to die.
I actually want to talk a little bit more about that Lawrence Fishburne's character, because he's a doctor first and foremost. He's not like the geneticist who's coming up with the vaccine, who's doing the testing, but he's a doctor at the CDC. He just happens to be so high up that he doesn't have to do that groundwork anymore. He doesn't have to do, the nitty gritty stuff anymore. And I love the ending. I particularly love the ending scene where he explains the handshake, where he's like, it's a sign that I'm not afraid of you, kind of. And he like you said, he gives what was for his family, he gives the vaccine to somebody else, basically. That even though he did something earlier in the film to protect his family out of desperation, he's still a good person, and he still does a good deeds throughout the movie.
You're talking about the handshake and how that, I mean, I would say that is very important to this movie. A lot of this movie focuses on how illnesses are transferred. They make a key point of like zooming in on everything that someone who might be infected touch, like what we touch in our daily lives, from like doorknobs to like folders and stuff. How we interact with people, just being on the bus, someone, just coughing or whatever, how close proximity. They do a big focus on that. And, real world thing too, to probably the best thing you can do and stuff like this is, be sure to wash your hands and to stop touching your face. Don't touch your face. It's something we subconsciously do all the time, but those things are what help, spread or help get you sick or whatever, is by like touching your face and stuff. So it's very important that they go into so much about how important it is, like how important touch is for the spread of the virus, to, actually show that gesture, like you said, of him, shaking hands with the janitor and his son.
Yeah, it's a really good scene. I mean, if you watch anything from this film, honestly, just that scene is really, really kind of uplifting and heartwarming. Like, we're all in this together kind of thing. So I particularly enjoyed that.
I think this movie does a great job touching on a lot of different topics, looking at a lot of different things, all under this, reaction to, or, response to illness and stuff on such a mass scale and stuff too. Randall, what would you generally say about people, who are considering watching this movie, specifically people considering watching this movie right now?
The big thing about this film, if you're just watching it today, is enjoy the fact that there's glorious performances in it. There's not a weak link actor in this entire movie. Everyone nails their respective characters, and as a movie, it's really good to watch. Just don't get sucked into the paranoia of the film in light of what's happening today.
If you guys like this video, this content, be sure to give us a rating, a thumbs up. If you want to see more content, Randall and I do more movie reviews. We also look at television shows as well. So to see that content, you can subscribe, and you can go to our YouTube page to see more stuff. For now, I'm Matt in Michigan. See you guys.
And I'm Randall here in Texas. Everyone have a great day.